Okay, so this video is called Demystify Soloing, which is the third video in the series that I'm doing called Demystifying Jazz. Um, it's called Demystifying Jazz, but honestly, all of these principles that I'm getting into today and that I'm getting into within the scope of this series can be applied to any kind of music. The only reason I'm calling it Demystifying Jazz is because of the chromatic nature of jazz music and the sophistication that it brings along with it usually causes students and people within that genre to have a lot of confusion and a lot of hangups when it comes to comping and composition and everything else. Like how do we navigate these changes easily, um, almost like a blues player would through 1-4-5 changes. They play effortlessly. They don't have to think about a lot of stuff. They're very musical. And jazz musicians generally are looking for that same thing. Obviously, all musicians are. But I would say the chromaticism probably gives them the chromaticism and the sophistication along with the harmony. Playing through the changes versus playing over the changes gives them a lot of hard time. So this whole series seeks to probably enhance people who play other styles, enhance what they're already doing, and then clarify things for jazz musicians who are looking to up their game or to nullify some of the issues that they're having. So the first two videos that I did, the first one was called Active versus Resting, and the second one is called Rhythmic Phrasing. You're going to want to watch both of those before you watch this video. If you haven't seen those, you're going to want to check those out because this is basically an extension of those. So you're kind of jumping into the middle of the storyline with this particular video. It might be useful if you watch this on its own, but the second you start getting confused or lost or whatever, there's two other videos prior to this that will get you caught up as to where we are. So the first thing I want to do is review a couple of the concepts from the rhythmic phrasing video that I did, where I discuss strong beats versus weak beats, points of takeoff and resolution, target notes, and then also the last thing I want to review real quick is anticipations and what they are, because that's going to be key to all of the rhythmic phrasing, both in terms of rhythm and in terms of melody, both for songwriting, music composition in any style, soloing, regardless of whether or not those solos are improvised or predetermined. All of that depends on strong beats, weak beats, target tones, anticipations. So I want to review that real quick. Anyway, what we're going to do here is we're going to get into the strong beats. The strong beats are the odd beats, beats 1, beats 3, beats 5, beats 7. Those are the strong beats. Those are points of resolution. They're periods at the end of the sentence. Those are the places where your sentence ends, and then you can also take off from those points and launch into a whole new phrase. And in the last video, I equated this basically to a vert ramp, where the ramp itself is the form. Those are the points of takeoff, and the lip of the vert ramp is the point of takeoff, and it's also the point of resolution. And that is probably the most important part of the ramp, because that's going to send you off to a zone where you're totally free to do what your imagination allows you to do, up until the point that you come back down, and you better nail that. You better nail that part, because if you don't, you're going to bust and it's going to suck and you're going to get hurt. So out of all of the points of the ramp, I would say the lip on both sides, beat 1 and beat 5, those are the most important parts of the ramp, because if you screw that up, you're done for. But if you get it right, there's a lot of freedom in that. So I want to make that point with these strong beats and weak beats. Beats 1, beats 3, beats 5, beats 7. These are the strong beats. And then it cycles around again. 1, 3, 5, 7. Of these strong beats, the most important strong beat is beat 1. And this can be demonstrated by listening to James Brown. It can be demonstrated by listening to Mono Neon. It can be demonstrated by listening to Parliament. For whatever reason, well, because of James Brown, probably, because he originated this. James Brown emphasizes the 1 all the time. So if you really want to hear somebody just going over the top and hammering home how important beat 1 is, listen to James Brown records, Prince records, Mono-Neon records, Larry Graham, Graham Central Station records. They all give this lesson better than anything else I've ever heard. They've got beat 1 down, which is the end and the beginning, and you can hear it. So if you want to get an audio version of what it is I'm saying and you want to get straight to it, I would start with that. Listen to them. So the downbeat of each measure in a 2-measure phrase, the downbeat of measure 1 and the downbeat of measure 2. So in other words, beat 1 and beat 5. Those are the most important. They rank at the top. Beat 1, most important. Beat 5, second most important. And then beats 3 and beats 7 are third in line for importance. You can take off and resolve on any one of those points. The reason why beat 1 is most important is because it's the most predictable. It's the most commonly used. It's rock solid. It's the standard. That's why. Just because that's how, it's just an observation as to how music works. You listen to music, you observe things, and you're like, oh, people are always resolving or taking off on beat 1 all of the time. It's not a rule so much as an observation, but beat 1 is utilized and emphasized more than everything else. But then the next one in line is beat 5. So the downbeat of each measure always are great points of resolution. You can take off from there. If you take off from beat 1, the next point of resolution, everything you're doing, if you start a phrase on beat 1, all of it is in service to either beat 5. So you're just trying to get from here to here. Where's my little marker guy? You're trying to get from either beat 1 to beat 5, most commonly. You can also go from beat 1 all the way over to beat 7, or all the way over to this beat 1, or 3, or, you can go as far as you want. You can delay the resolution. But the point is, in terms of common takeoff and landing points, beat 1 and beat 5 are where you connect ideas. You can also connect beat 1 to beat 3. So if we're dealing with styles of music like bebop, where you've got different chords from different scale sources, from different keys, changing at 300 miles an hour, every 2 beat, on the beats 1, 3, 5, 7, there's a new chord. There's a new chord to deal with. You're going to want to zero in on chord tones. You don't have to, obviously, but a lot of guys get from beat 1 to beat 3 to beat 5, beat 5 to beat 7, and it's super tight. But you can loosen that up. You don't have to do that. I'm just giving you an example as to a style of music where you're just leapfrogging from 1 to 3 to 5 to 7, just going and playing through the changes throughout. But you can stretch it. You can come up with a harmonic idea, and everything is a pickup all the way to beat 5 of measure 2, if you want. So I'll let jazz musicians think about that and figure that out. Okay, the second thing that I want to review is anticipations. Anticipations are a resolution that comes early, and it makes your music a lot more interesting, a lot more rhythmic, gives it a lot more energy. All styles of music can use it, but jazz in particular uses it all the time. Not only does it use it all the time, it's necessary to use it. Otherwise, it sounds super square and lame. So, what is an anticipation? An anticipation is an attack on an upbeat that is followed by either a rest or a tied note on the following downbeat. That's what an anticipation is from an intellectual point of view. I can't stress enough, though, how important it is to listen to music. And even though you consciously, logically, intellectually understand what an anticipation is, because I just defined it, just having that definition in your head doesn't mean anything. It just kind of enlightens you as to what's going on. But you really do need to listen to a lot of music and hear it. And when you do, you can hear it straight away. It's very clear. So here's an example of some anticipations. I got 2-quarter note, 3-quarter notes, a couple of eighth notes. You can see this example right here. Ba, 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 da. This note is anticipating beat 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and this note melodically belongs to this beat. You're anticipating this beat. In other words, you're playing this beat early. There's a rest here. This is coming on an and, or on an upbeat, I should say. It could be a 16th note too. It doesn't matter. If it's an upbeat and the following downbeat doesn't have an attack, rhythmic attack, melodic attack, harmonic attack, whatever, it's an anticipation. So there's a rest here demonstrating this anticipation. And if there's a melody note here, it belongs here. You're playing the melody note early. That's all you're doing. And also that melody note belongs to whatever the chord is here. So if you've got a new chord here, even though, you know, this measure might have a C major 7 and this measure might have a B chord, all right, if this note is C on a C major 7 and you play it here, but it's anticipating the next beat and you've got a B chord, that's going to be a B7, it's going to be a B7 flat 9. That belongs to the beat. It's going to affect the chord. It's going to affect the harmony here. So just because you play a note here and you're not playing it here and there's a rest here, doesn't mean that it has nothing to do with this chord. It has everything to do with this chord. And in fact, this chord owns that note now. This chord doesn't own it. The chord that you play on 3x, it doesn't own that C. The upcoming chord, the B, owns that C. So yeah, that would be a B. Obvious, it'd have to be a B7 flat 9, but that's a whole other thing. I don't want to get too far out right now. Anyway, that's one example. So again, an attack on an upbeat, tied, or resting on the next downbeat. That's what an anticipation is. You're just playing it early. Here's another example. Rest, dot, da, da. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, dot, da, da. This note here on the and of beat 7 in this case is anticipating beat 8. So this note belongs to this beat and it belongs to whatever harmony is there also. So those are anticipations and it's good to know those. Yeah, you'll need to know those. We're going to get into it. So anticipations are key. Strong beats, weak beats, key. Strong measures, weak measures, key, especially when we're getting into harmony and composition and things like that. So even though this seems like, you know, book learning, nothing too special, basic type of stuff, it's the entire engine as to how this harmony, soloing, composition, songwriting, improv, jazz, funk, soul, rock and roll, I don't care what it is. This is the backbone of Western music right here. And the sooner you get this down, the sooner you internalize it, the sooner you listen to music. And I can't stress listening to albums enough, not passively, but actively. Just sit down and listen to what's going on. Tie the two together, tie this intellectual conceptualization, but also tie it in with your ear, and a lot of things are going to click. It's important to do that. The other point I want to make real quick is every single note that you play after you've come to a point of resolution is a pickup to the next point of resolution. So there's only two things going on when it comes to melody and the forward motion of melody. You're either resolving or you're playing a pickup to the next point of resolution. That's it. There's only two sounds, active and resting. Again, just like in video 1, like I mentioned. So here in this example, down here, we're starting a song. You know, here's your little clef here indicating that we're at the beginning of something. So we're not resolving on beat 1. We're taking off here. And this is, you know, quarter notes. It's not too exciting. But after you've established beat 1 rhythmically, everything else until you get to the point of beat 3 is a pickup. Or if your next point of resolution is beat 5, or the anticipation of beat 5, it's a pickup. So you're either resting because you've ended the sentence, or you're saying a sentence. You see what I'm saying? It's just like English grammar or any other kind of grammar for that matter. You're either coming to the end of your point of resolution, or you're continuing to talk until you get to your point. And the continuing to talk bit is a pickup. Next thing I'm going to get into is pickups and how to get from one point of resolution to the next point of resolution. All we're trying to do is connect some chord tones here. And that is the total key to improvising, soloing, composition, songwriting. I don't care what, it's that simple. You're literally trying to get to point A, from point A to point B with interesting melodic pickups that tell a story. So if you're driving a car, you're at a stop sign, and 2 blocks away you can see a stop light. You're at a point of resolution. In a moment, you're going to take off, and then you're going to get to another point of resolution. And there's all kinds of stuff that can go on in between. And that's pretty much the same with music. Okay, so we got into strong beats, we got into weak beats, we got into anticipations, we got into points of resolution, we got into points of takeoff. So now what I want to do is I want to quickly give you 7 examples, 7 quick examples. They're all different categories. So repeated notes, diatonic neighbor tones, chromatic notes, arpeggios, cellular units that prolong a note, cellular units that voice lead into another note, and enclosures. And for every one of those categories that I just mentioned, there's endless amounts of possibilities. So I'm just going to give you one example of each because I'm trying to make this video. This is an ultra crash course video. There's so much to talk about, but it's just really a quick demonstration to give you an idea about a different way to think, really, more than it is about how to master improvisation and soloing right now. There's a lot to think about, a lot to talk about, but I'm just trying to impress the importance of strong beats and weak beats, the importance of rhythm, the importance of understanding points of resolution and pickups into another point of resolution, and that is actually how music is created, rather than meandering through a bunch of scales and chord scales. Like, forget chord scales, man. Unless you're orchestrating and arranging and composing. I mean, chord scales are great, don't get me wrong. If you're arranging, composing, all that, chord scales are fantastic. They're way more fun to think about when you're deriving parts and when you're deriving well, whatever, that's a whole other composition, arranging, orchestration, that's a whole other thing, man. And you're just trying to play some music right now, so I'm going to keep it that. Yeah, okay, we'll come back to that in a little bit. Anyhow, we're just trying to get from beat 1 to beat 3. That's all we're doing right now. I'm going to do it in 8th note feel because this is demystifying jazz soloing. But as you can see down here, I've also got it in quarter note feel. So you can extrapolate the 8th notes to become quarter notes, and you just extend the measures. And if that's complicated or confusing, don't worry about it, because I got a bunch of other videos coming up. Like I said, this is a crash course, and I got to try to make this quick. So I'm going to do the best I can, hopefully, and keep this like a half an hour long. So first example, we're starting the song. Okay, the song's not going on. So because we're starting the song, it's impossible for beat 1 to be a point of resolution. We haven't even started the tune yet. So right out of the gate, we're on beat 1. That's a takeoff point. We're taking off. We're not resolving anything because there's nothing to resolve. Unless there's a pickup into that beat 1, but that's a whole other thing. I'm going to leave that out. Right now, there's not a pickup, not in this sweet tune. So the tune is starting on beat 1. Now we're trying to get to beat 3. Let's imagine that beat 1 is a D minor chord, and let's imagine beat 3 is a G7 chord, because everybody likes those. Starting on beat 1, starting on D. Everything is about getting to G on beat 3. All of this is a pickup. Like, this isn't even a point of resolution at this point because we're trying to get here. The downbeat of beat 3 in this case is actually the point of resolution. So you could almost consider all of these to be a pickup into beat 3. But I don't want to muddy the waters, so beat 1, target tone, right here. Now we're trying to get to beat 3. Example 1 is how you get to beat 3 using a common tone, using the same note. And we're doing an 8th note feel. So D, 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 G. All right, that's how we get to G. We're just repeating the same note. Da, 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 da. That's it. Okay, that's example 1. Okay, here's example 2. The next example that I'm going to do is a quick demonstration of diatonic lower neighbor tones. So all of these examples are going to start on D. And as I mentioned a moment ago, our chord there is going to be D minor 7, and our chord here is going to be G7. That's going to be the same for all these examples, just to make life easy. And I'm always going to start on D. So D is our takeoff point. Everything else is a pickup to get into the next target tone. For whatever reason, we want our target tone to be on the downbeat of beat 3, most likely because the harmony changed. Now we have a new chord to define, G7. I establish my D minor 7 by playing the root D. Everything else is a pickup. And now we have the technique of lower neighbor tones. So D, drop down an octave to D, E, F, G. So all we're doing is just leading into this diatonically. And we have 3 notes to get us from here to here. So if we're doing diatonic lower neighbor tones, you can actually reverse engineer it, G, F, E, D. So that's where this comes from. You're just leading it. You're here. You want to get to here. And this is a mechanism of as how to do that. So everything that I'm doing in between this and this for like the next few examples are just melodic avenues that you can take. Like when you're driving a car from point A to point B, again, generally there's more than one route. You can take the scenic route. You can take the straightforward route. You can take all kinds of routes. You can take a long, involved, crazy route that doesn't make any sense. You can do whatever you want to do. It's just, what result do you want? Okay, this is the result I want. Then that's what I'm going to do. So this is pretty direct. It's diatonic. It's not chromatic. It's pretty straightforward. Perfect for pop styles and things like that. Everybody uses this. I don't care if it's jazz musicians or not. Everything doesn't have to be hardcore chromaticism all the time. Sometimes it's nice just to have a diatonic walk up into your next chord tone or target tone. And that's what we're doing. Lower neighbor tones. Next example, upper neighbor tones, attacking the G from above. So that's coming up in a second. All right, here's the second part of the first example. Now we're going to do upper neighbor tones. So we're attacking or approaching G from above. So our key note here, that's established, that's D. We want to get from D to G. So we're going to just do it diatonically. And the option that we have is to go D, descend to C, descend to B, descend to A, descend to G. And that's how we connect tones. That's how we connect chords. That's playing the changes. Outlining the D minor with the D, outlining the G7 with the G. And we have a melodic device, usually ear-based, hopefully ear-based. That's the goal of all of this. Right now, we're logically thinking about it in slow motion and on paper, so to speak. All of these are going to be ear decisions. So you want to get used to the sound of these different mechanisms. And once you get used to that, then you start developing a vocabulary, and then you start developing spontaneity, and then you start developing your own voice instead of rehashing licks and exercises and all that plastic, boring stuff in scales, for Christ's sake. All right. Up next, chromatic approaches. Chromatic approaches from above, chromatic approaches from below. Very popular with jazz, very popular with blues, very popular in rock and roll, 70s rock and roll. Slash does it all the time. He has an idea of chromatic connecting. I've heard him do it. So it's all over the Thin Lizzy. I don't care, man. People do it all the time. Freddie King, Slash, Thin Lizzy. It's not limited to jazz. So now I'm going to do arpeggios. So I can use any arpeggio note that I want. If the chord is D minor 7 here, and we're trying to get to G7, any arpeggio tone is fine. And you can jump around. You can make it angular. You can make it in thirds. You can make it smooth. You can make it angular, however you want to do it. Let's do, we'll do it, how do I want to do this? Maybe I'll do it like that. All right, so here's the root. Here's the 7th. Here's the 5th. Flat 3rd. To get to the root. All right, so D minor 7 to G. My starting note is D, my taking off point. Okay, so this is not a point of resolution, it's a point of takeoff. This is the point of resolution that I'm going to. And then I'm using arpeggios to fill out the pickup, to fill out the space in between in a melodic way. And in this, I just decided to descend in thirds. I could make it more angular if I wanted to. You can order this however you want. But in this case, I just went D, C, the flat 7, down to the 5th, down to the flat 3rd, up to G. Like I said, I want to stress you don't want to get this math on your mind when you're playing. This is just for when you're practicing. This is just for ear training. Most importantly, this is really just ear training. You don't want to you want to practice this stuff, but you don't want to sit there obsessively practicing it. The point is you want to get a handle on what it sounds like so you can employ these things by ear as you're going along, rather than, oh, I'm on D and I want to get to G, so I'm going to do this chromatic approach from below and then throw in arpeggios starting on the 5th and then blah, blah, blah. And that's what a lot of videos and books and all this stuff go on about. The point isn't really to memorize these routines or to sit there obsessing about it. The point is to get an idea of what these things sound like, man, so that you can understand what you're hearing and why what you're hearing either works or doesn't work. Everything is in service to the ears. The ears aren't in service to the books, to the schools, to the articles, to the videos, none of that. So we're doing things differently on this channel. The whole point of everything I'm doing is about ear training. And it's about getting from one point to another point in a musical way. It's about getting you aware of what it is your instincts are already telling you in the first place, so that you can control the music and the music doesn't control you. That's the point, not to sit around pontificating about mathematical ways you can get from point A to point B. If that's what you're doing, you're not going to be playing anything, not live anyway. Maybe you can write, but you're not going to be playing anything live. Okay. That's arpeggios. Next up is cellular units. So I'm going to do two variations of a cellular unit idea. One cellular unit concept is to prolong a note, like we did in the first example, just, let's see, D, 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 right? There we go. And then target note on beat 3, that was the first example, a repeated note. You can actually disguise that repeated note and make it more interesting. Functionally, you're just treading water still, but you can add some chromaticism and stuff to make it more interesting. And you can use it with what I call cellular units. One aspect of cellular units is to prolong a note. Another aspect of cellular units is to have a 4-note chunk that allows you to voice lead into another chord tone of another chord. I'll do that next. So let's check this one out though first. So we're starting here, we're ending here, and then we got some decorative bits in the middle. All it is we're just going up a whole step, descending chromatically back down to the note that we started on. So you're just extending the note, but rather than continuing to play the same note, you're throwing in a little bit of filler. But essentially all of this is functioning as a static D. You're just making it more interesting than that static D I showed you in example 1. You could do it, here's another one. You could do D, C, how about this? Whatever, super easy. C, C sharp, D. All right, those are chromatic examples of cellular units. Here's a chordal, like maybe a chordal example. you know? So here's the fifth, flat 7, root. Right? We're just treading water. So in this particular case, where we're treading water with an arpeggiated sound, and the other two examples I just showed you, we're treading water with a chromatic sound. There's also, anything you can think of that starts here and starts on D and gets you back to D before you hit your next target tone. So that's kind of a couple of examples of cellular units that prolong a note. Now I'm going to get into the next topic, which is cellular units that voice lead into a note. Okay, so in this example, I'm going to do what's popular, a super popular cellular unit in jazz is the 1-2-3-5. Let's do a 1-2-3-5, voice leading into the G. So starting on D, I dropped it down an octave just for this example to E, to F, Okay, so you can do this a couple of different ways. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. All right, so D minor 7, G7. Okay, so here's my root, 9th, 3, 5. And then it voice leads nicely, right down the scale source, right down to G. I could also do a fixed version because I like the 1-2 natural 3-5. I don't mind that chromaticism. Sometimes I'll just do that F sharp. I don't care. Make it a natural third. Boop. That's an example of something that would have thrown me off a long time ago. Like, what does the natural third have to do with D minor 7? It doesn't have anything to do with D minor 7. It also doesn't have to do anything with the C Ionian. Technically, whatever, C Lydian. Okay, fine, but whatever, C Ionian, right? This doesn't gel well with people who've been studying jazz for a year or two. This F sharp is going to be like, what is this? This has nothing to do with nothing. It's got nothing to do with the chord, got nothing to do with the tonality, got nothing to do with anything, but it's on a weak beat. And music is elastic, way more elastic than you think. It's a rubber band. So there's a point of stretching it and a point of tension, and there's a point of relaxation and a point of completeness in a natural state. So you could do the diatonic 1-2-3-5 that fits the chord, fits the tonality, it's nice and neat, or you could do a more chromatic version. You could do that all over the place as long as you're getting to the downbeat, the next strong beat. Not necessarily the next strong beat. It doesn't have to be 3x. It could be 5x. It could be 7x. But you get what I'm saying. When you get to the next point of resolution and you have your target note and that target note makes musical sense, all you're doing is decorating this note and this note. Most of what's going on in the melody is what's going on the downbeats, and everything else is just ornamentation. So this is when you can take advantage of chromaticism. And this is when what looks like something out of D major actually quote unquote fits. I don't like that term. It works musically. It functions musically. And it brings in a little bit of color, brings in a little bit of tension, and all is resolved on the G7. Like the internal voices of the G7 chord will naturally resolve that F sharp. That F sharp is hanging on the D minor 7, and then it's going to resolve with the interior voices back down to F natural, because that'll be played by the chord, or up to G anyways. So, and if you want to get fancy, you could look at this as like a delayed, this is an F sharp to G. This is a T to Do, not T to Do, never mind that, but like an F sharp to G, thing. I'm getting deeper than I want to get. Okay, whatever. It makes sense musically. It sounds good musically. That's all I got to worry about right now. We can get into the weeds later on. Like I said, music first, analysis later on. So let's see what's up next. Okay, whatever. G. Okay, what am I doing now? Up next, cellular units. Oh, enclosures. There's a million enclosures. There's a million of all these examples. I'm just giving you 7 different categories, but within each category, there's tons of examples. I'm going to give you an enclosure. Maybe I'll give you a couple of enclosures. Okay, so for the last category of melodic possibilities to get you from 1x to 3x, I'm going to do 2 enclosures. Both of them are going to be diatonic enclosures. There's a bunch of different kinds of enclosures you can use, and that's a whole other video and a lot more study that goes along with it. So I'm just going to keep it simple, demonstrate what an enclosure is real quick. What you can do is starting on D, here we go, diatonic enclosure, 2 notes from below, so D, E, F natural, 2 below, approaching G, and then 1 note above, approaching G. So 2 diatonic from below, 1 diatonic from above, taking me to G. That's one example of an enclosure. We're enclosing the note G with notes from above and notes from below to finally get to the target tone. You can also approach it from below and then above. You could approach it all from below or all from above. There's a bunch of different kinds of enclosures, but I'm just giving you a couple of diatonic examples. Diatonic relative to the harmony. 2 from above, 1 from below. So D jumps up to B, descends down to A diatonically. Still approaching G, but instead of just approaching the G, now we're going to come at it underneath, 1 more note, F from below to the G. So that's another diatonic enclosure. And that's it for this that's it for these examples. So I want to conclude this video by mentioning, as I did a little bit earlier, that this is just a really tight crash course. It's a quick overview, a quick demonstration of how melodies work, how rhythmic phrasing works, and that the whole point is to connect one takeoff point to a point of resolution, back to another point of resolution, which then becomes a takeoff point just after that. Everything is a point of resolve, and everything else is a pickup to the next point of resolve. And so hopefully this video demonstrated that.
You know the notes to stroke to play my heartstrings, but the dissonance makes the distance between us extreme. Recorded lines of distorted